Hi, Nikki. Thanks for joining us tonight. Really excited to have you for
Great.
this
Yeah.
series of the Inclusion Conversation here at the Inclusion Initiative. And I'm so glad that you agreed to do this and just be like really a light to our communities with the work that you're doing and how much of your career you've dedicated to serving our community. It's awesome. So I'm really excited to dive in, learn a little bit more about you and your background. And before we get started, for those of you that have any questions or want to get to know Nikki a little bit better, she's a beta tester in our community. So be sure to ping her, say hi, reach out, and we'll, of course, provide the information about her organization and how you can get in touch with her and her team. If you're interested, like in getting involved and supporting them, that's great too. So we'll provide that in the replay for everybody within the network. So without further ado, I'm welcoming Nikki Beasley, who is the Executive Director of Foster Advocates in Minnesota. So a place that I went to school and lived in for about 10 years. So it's really great to be connected to a Minnesotan. I do miss it there. So, but welcome, Nikki. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Thank you, Grace. So happy to be here. And hello to the Inclusion Initiative uh, world out there. And yeah, just really excited to be here. Thank you for asking me. And yeah, let's go.
Let's go. All right. Well, so before we dive into just the really interesting work that you do with foster youth and the child welfare system, what would you like the community to know and learn about you and your story?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to share. I um, was in care myself from the age of 10 until I aged out at 18. And what propelled my sister and me into foster care is both of our parents became incarcerated. And so we bounced around with family initially, and with family not having the ability at that time to really care for us in the needs that we had, we went into foster care and ended up living in a number of different homes, all with strangers or people that were strangers to us. And the other dynamic that we faced was that we, being Black young girls, were placed in white families. And so there's the culture shock, culturally speaking, and then as far as not being with your Black family and around Black tradition and all of that, it was a big, and then moving to Minnesota, big culture shock. So, yeah, it was intense, and I really worked really hard at trying to look like everything was normal. But whenever we left the house with the foster family, it was very much obvious that we were the other ones. We were the kids that didn't belong, and we were often identified or introduced as, well, these are my kids, and then these are my foster girls. And so you really develop
Mm-hmm.
othering at a pretty young age. And then again, you have a lot of the cross cultural issues that come up as well. Um, but I went to high school, went to college. Again, if you looked at me just on a normal day in school, you wouldn't know that any of what was going on at home was happening. Um, but but it was, and you really learn, at least for me, I really learned how to mute that part of me and just show up as what was acceptable or what was expected.
Yeah.
And I did that pretty well. I did that pretty well. Um, so because of the different abuses and neglect that we suffered in the foster families, I made a vow with myself at a pretty young age, I would say before I was out of high school, that what I wanted to do in life is be the kind of adult that I didn't have in my life. And so I didn't know how that would look. I didn't know what that really meant. But I just remember making that internal decision that I'm going to be better and different than these adults that are supposed to be caring for me or caring about me. And so when I went off to college, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I ended up taking a psychology class as a freshman, loved it. And I said, well, this is the path I'm going to take. I either want to be a counselor or a psychologist, and then that married with this internal decision that I made was just the perfect match. And so that thrusted me into the helping field, and working with youth in Minneapolis that were experiencing homelessness and family conflict. And I'm like, well, who better than someone who knows what it feels like to be, not in your home of origin, to have experienced, for me, a brief stint of homelessness and lots of conflict in the family, in foster families. And so that started the career. It was very serendipitous in many, many, many ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love how you were able to find um, that your lived experience would help you help folks that didn't necessarily share your exact lived experience, but all of the parallels, right,
Mhm.
of just the injustice and inequities that communities face, especially communities of color and especially Black communities. And so it's for me, I also worked in an organization where I served people experiencing homelessness. And the ability to connect with that community was tenfold because I could share this lived experience of displacement, of having experienced things like hunger and not having basic needs met, but also not having a home
Right.
and not thinking that there's no future, right? Being in despair because you don't feel like there's a future for you because
Mhm.
you're not supported by a family unit that is supposed to, be there and love you. And so it to me it's been astounding in my last 10 years in the nonprofit space to really realize like how much of my lived experience is such a it's right, it's hard to have gone through it, but it's also a gift to the communities that we serve. And I wish I'm seeing it happen more and more. And I really love that you're the ED of foster advocates. It's so important to have folks with lived experience leading these organizations, leading these movements, and
Yes.
being the voices of influence in how we shape policies and guidelines and programming
Mhm.
for folks that have lived experience. And so it is, I just love your story, your trajectory, and I really am excited to dig into your work with you a little bit. But
Yeah.
stepping back, um, with your foster family. So you said you aged out at 18. So you were never adopted by that family, but did you stay that whole time with them?
Not with one family. We had
Okay.
um, three or four different placements before I ended up with the family that I was with the longest, which was 5 years. And I went off to college and turned 18. My birthday's in September, so right at the same time of starting college. Um, and then turned 18, and that was it. So,
Wow.
and for me, what led, well, the summer before I went off to college, so it was after graduation from high school, but before college, that was the period of homelessness for me because the family that we were living with decided that they didn't want to have foster kids anymore, which for me was okay, but my sister is younger. And so it meant she would then have to go into another foster home. And so while I was then going off to college. And so that summer, I bounced around. I mean, I stayed at friends' houses, couches. I was like, well, I know I'm not 18 yet, so I'm not technically out of the system. But as a family, they decided they weren't going to have us anymore. And I wasn't going to then go into another home for such a short time because I was going off to college and I went out of state for a couple of my first 2 years of college. So, um, and it was hard. It was the first time that my sister and I were then separated because we had stayed together in all the homes. But I remember we sat down and we talked, and I said, if you want me to stay in Minnesota, I will. I won't go to school out of state so that I could be close to her. And she was okay. She said, you got to go to college. You got to follow your dreams. And it ended up being very, very good for her in some ways that she kind of had to stand on her own. Um, and and she blossomed and bloomed in high school, and things ended up being really, really wonderful. But we didn't know that, we didn't have that as a guarantee. We didn't know that that's how it
No.
would end up. Um, but it was risky. We took the risk. Mostly we decided that risk together.
Yeah. And I'm really it makes me so, I mean, it makes me happy that there was this positive outcome, especially in your ability to, maintain your relationship, that you weren't torn apart.
Yes.
That, I hope you're in touch still to this
Oh,
day.
absolutely. Oh, yeah. She called me right before we jumped on. So
Oh,
yes,
wonderful. Yeah. But it breaks my heart that you, at 17 years old and however old she was, that you had to talk about that and make that
yeah,
decision.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
so heartbreaking. And it's like, this is, all of the nuanced experiences that we go through that we can't always talk about and share and help each other work through.
Right.
Especially because, right, of the dominant narratives of our society that we've talked about before.
Hmm.
You should be grateful. You got a home. You weren't on the street.
Yeah.
Your parents were incarcerated. So you should just be grateful for this, whatever you got. And it is not okay. It's not okay that we can't speak more authentically to what our lived experiences are. But I'm
Mhm.
so glad that you're sharing this with us tonight because it really helps even within our community, right? Because our experiences are so varied.
Yeah.
Each one is so unique. It's
Mhm.
really important for us to hear all of the different kinds of experiences that happen within these systems. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. You're welcome.
So you went to college. That's awesome, amazing, because right, we all know the horrible statistics of
Yeah.
foster youth
Yeah.
and even graduating from high school, but then going on to four-year colleges. What is
Hmm.
it? The graduation rate, I think, is between 1% and 3% nationwide.
3%. 3%. Yeah.
That's horrible. That's
Yes.
really, really terrible. And, I was adopted, but it wasn't a good situation. But I did go on to college and I did finish, which
Mhm.
was great, but it took me 9 years to do it. And I'm sure that you on your own you had similar experience in terms of the challenge of navigating that complex system, understanding what credits were and how to accomplish them and how to, take on this whole like student financial ecosystem, and not getting into debt, layers and layers of debt. Like I struggle with all that too. And so it would be really interesting to hear, if you're comfortable sharing, when you were transitioning and you knew that you were going to go to college, but you didn't have that family support or resources at all, right? So you were figuring it out by yourself. Did you get any state support? Did you get any kind of resources as you were making that transition into school?
No, no, I did all of that on my own. In fact, I remember applying for colleges, and while I was still a senior, it was likely, well, maybe it was even my junior year into senior year, but whenever you typically apply for colleges, and I did all of that on my own, the FAFSA, all on my own. If I remember, I
Yeah.
think I got some support from like my guidance counselor, who I had a really good relationship with in high school. But that was it. That was
Mm-hmm.
it. So navigating, and it's been a while because I graduated from high school and college. It was quite a long time ago, but yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just some of the grit that I had and still have as a part of just how I am. And not being afraid to ask for help. But I know that that's not always the case. And sometimes people will kind of sink before they'll ask for help. And I was able to seek those resources out. They weren't given to me, but I also wasn't afraid to ask for the help that I needed once I got to school, figuring out who do I need to talk to and what's the registrar's office and the dean and the differences. And, so doing that bode well for me in that way, and help
Mm-hmm.
in my being able to graduate. And then I actually went on to grad school as well. So um, definitely defying some of the not great odds that we have against us as adoptees and foster care alum.
Right. But it shouldn't have been up to you as a 17-year-old to
Nope. Yeah.
get all of those resources for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, why did you have to do that by yourself? Why did I have to do that by myself? There's no excuse for
Mhm.
it. And yet I feel like the system hasn't changed a ton, although we are seeing some progress. And I'm
Mhm.
curious, with just your many years in this space and serving youth in this space, what are some of these changes that you're seeing that are positive and giving you hope?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say so. Foster advocates. Well, let me back up. Prior to coming on board as first a board member and now the executive director, most of my career has been working in the homelessness space. So homelessness as with young people, with families, and with those that are being trafficked. Because in all of those scenarios, homelessness, poverty is really at the root of a lot of the issues that the different populations found themselves in that I worked with. But coming to foster advocates, I would say is the work is very targeted. And so we do social change, systems change, and policy work on behalf of child welfare, kind of big umbrella, but very specifically our foster youth, and even more specifically, those that are transitioning out of care into adulthood. And, that being on the board and then now as the executive director, seeing a lot of the changes that our organization has been able to make has been amazing. And I'm new to the ED role. And so these bills that we passed, 5 bills over the last 5 years, we're a young organization. So each year of our existence, there's been pretty significant legislation that's passed in Minnesota, and really proud of that. It all was, it preceded me. But to answer your question, I'm really hopeful because everything that we've passed really helps those coming behind us. And that feels really good. There's an office for the ombudsperson for foster youth that just has been stood up. We passed that legislation in 2022. That office will be fully operational in April of 2024. Huge. I mean, to just have that even be a law that's on the books is amazing. And it's like, how did we wait this long for this office to exist? And what was happening beforehand?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the big questions. And then the other big one is in 2021, we passed legislation that enables young people that are in care at the age of 13 or older at any point. 13 is kind of the beginning age that they have to have been in care. They are entitled now to the full cost of attendance for college, for post-secondary.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's our fostering independence grants. And that was a huge, huge feat. Again, it was, how do we create opportunities for better outcomes for our foster youth? And one way, as we know, is through education. And when we also then know that there's only 3% of us that actually get to college and finish, we have to do something about it. So
Mm-hmm. Yep.
that's how that legislation was born. And we've served over 500 students since the beginning of 23. So now we're in the second academic year. So
That's fantastic. You're just getting started.
Just getting started. Yes.
That's
So,
really exciting.
mhm.
Awesome. I would love to ask you a little bit too about, you're talking right now about the important work you're doing at Foster Advocates and kind of your journey to the ED role there.
Mhm.
I'm really fascinated by just like all of the like stories, right, that we hear of the experiences of people in our community and the number of barriers put into place when we are entering the workforce, especially if we're coming from a place of aging out of foster care or broken adoptions, right, where we're on our own. And my own lived experience, but also folks that I've met along the way, a lot of us end up doing work that's obtainable in the moment, right? And we're not told or even allowed to dream about other possibilities for ourselves. And so many of us go into service work, part-time service work, right? And it's things that we are just able to grab,
Yeah.
especially as people of color, right? That's often an area of opportunity for us because we're seen, right, as
Mhm.
sometimes the community that should be doing that work.
Right.
And so it's really challenging when that is your work experience and perhaps you're in school, perhaps you're not, but then how do you grow from there? How do you obtain opportunities from there?
Mhm.
Especially when you have no one to turn to. You
Right.
have no mom or dad to ask questions. you don't have like a network of aunts and uncles and community members to be like pseudo mentors for you, right? You're just like, I'm putting food on the table for myself. Like that was a win today.
Yeah.
Or I had to choose between gas and paying my rent. And that was like, I got to do one of those, and that was a win today.
Hmm.
And it is so, uh, to me, it's infuriating, right? That like these are the options
Hmm.
that so many in our community start with when they first age out or leave their homes. And while their peers, right, their peers in school, they're getting all these fancy internships or working at mom and dad's company, or just like their work experience is just,
Hmm.
so the level is just so much higher from
Yeah.
the beginning
Yeah.
versus folk, my personal experience where I'm like, oh, I have a restaurant. I have like fast food experience. What can I do with that?
Hmm.
And so I really would love to hear more about like what your initial work opportunities were, and like how your lived experience aging out of foster care, like how you feel like that put certain challenges and barriers in place.
Hmm.
And yes, like you were able to be resilient, and you um you know utilized grit to get through and push through. But man,
Hmm.
we do that for decades. Like I'm exhausted. I'm sure you're exhausted.
Hmm.
We shouldn't have to constantly be on, like always being resilient and
Yeah.
being expected to be resilient, right? And
Hmm.
so it would be interesting to hear just a little bit more about your early career journey. And I guess, my whole point in asking all of this and saying all of this is, I would also like to learn from you, especially as you're doing this work with foster advocates, like how you hope this will change for people with your lived experience.
Yeah. Um, so I would say before or while I was in high school, I kept myself very busy. Some of that was so that I didn't have to really think or acknowledge or deal with some of the traumas that had happened from 10 years old up until at any point in my high school years and teenage years. And then coupled with also wanting to just assimilate and just look like what everybody else was doing. And so I was working at a movie theater, I was in track and field, I was in choir, I had friends, and that really was what everybody was doing. So then I wasn't sticking out in any particular way. Um, and then after graduating from college and then going to grad school, I think I kept a lot of that same, I need to just kind of look like what everybody else is doing in my peer group. The other thing that was a little different is that by that point, I had my son. So when I graduated in 1999 with my grad degree, my son was 4. So that also then necessitated the decisions I made and the moves I made around the type of work because it wasn't just me anymore. I'm now raising this child. And so um, in some ways, I think I had some entitlement of like, I did this hard work. I went to college, I went to grad school. Damn it, I am going to have a professional job.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. So, like, my first job was the job that I ended up being at for 12 years. And that was working with homeless youth in Minneapolis. Um, and really, from there, that's really what started my trajectory. It's because that first job was in the field that I went to school in. And because the messaging and the societal messaging and thoughts are, well, you get a job in the degree that you just graduated with, like
Mm-hmm.
you don't not do that. And so I think I really internalized that, and I didn't see doing anything else but kind of what society says is the right way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's similar, right? When we're internalizing many, many messages from society,
Yes.
especially with our lens through our lived experience
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even though you landed a role that matched the field that you were studying, which is fabulous, I'm really proud of you for that. I'm really proud of you for saying, like, I deserve this.
Yeah.
That's hard for me, like for as an adoptee and foster care alum, that's really hard for me still to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So I'm really proud of you for that, and that's really inspirational. And I hope you share that story like a lot because we need to hear that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but like even though that was the case for you, do you feel like the disconnect, right, from family, the disconnect from community, the disconnect from your heritage and people who like reflected, right, your ancestral heritage, do you feel like that do you feel like there were challenges that you had to navigate because of those disconnects, or do you feel like you weren't even aware of that until you were older?
I was just going to say, I don't think that I realized a lot of what you're asking until older and maybe even more recently, to be honest.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and it's that feeling of I don't know that that having those connections would have changed anything, because I do think some of how life has laid itself out has been just how I'm wired, and you know, just how things were supposed to be. Um, and it isn't until now that I'm like, oh, there are things that I missed out on that maybe wouldn't have made a difference, but would have created more of a wholeness for me,
Mm-hmm.
especially in those times that were hard. Um, I would have had something to lean on
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't have, and I didn't realize I didn't have until now. And the work that I'm doing at Foster Advocates and leading the organization, uh, I really that's where a lot of oh, that's what I was feeling. Because it's young people now that are leaders in our organization, our community board, that are able to articulate all of these feelings and thoughts because they're just newly out of, or just they've had pretty close proximity to their foster care time. And I remember it was their kickoff meeting in September, and I was like, I wish I was able to articulate how I was feeling at any given moment, the way these young people are now.
Mm-hmm.
It would have saved a lot of just angst and anguish and that disconnected feeling, even though I was trying to overcome it
Right.
constantly.
Right.
And so yeah, and then there's this empowering feeling too of like, okay, well, better late than never, right? Like I'm able to really show up authentically as a foster and really lean into that identity, and I don't have to mute it anymore. So there's a lot of empowering feelings in that. Uh, and so I try not to sit and regret or like I wish I would have had, decades ago. I'm like, wow, life is it's come full circle. And I didn't even know that that was even happening until it happened. So,
Yeah. Yes, sometimes we have to see it unfold in front of us before we realize that it happened to us.
yes, exactly, exactly.
That's really powerful, and I'm so glad that the youth that you work with just have been able to give like pieces of that to you,
Yeah.
because we're always right. We're always going to be, I feel, always, no matter what age we are, going to be processing and navigating what happened to us and how we felt about it and how it impacted us throughout all stages of our lives. And I wanted to ask too, like, it might it might not be as relevant for you because of the fields that you worked in, but I know for me, I constantly felt invisible in the workplace, constantly. Like, as this person that had this transracial adoption experience, this foster care experience, this loss experience, this trauma experience, like, I constantly felt invisible. And I
Mhm.
didn't think there was anybody in my workplace that I could relate to or really share, right? This experience with, to get the support and resources that I need. Did
Mhm.
you feel that, or did that again not come up until your recent role at Foster Advocates?
Yeah, that didn't come up until more recently. I think because especially my first role out of graduate school, I was so immersed in people around me that maybe didn't have my same exact life experience, but we were all sharing the the similarities in the work that we were doing, in that we were in this kind of grassrootsy, um, progressive organization. And so that's where we had shared identity amongst us. And and I'm friends with a lot of the people now to this day. And I mean, that's however many years ago. And we talk about it being an experience of like people who are in the service and then go to war together. And I'm not trying to say that working with young people is like going to war, but it's that same shared experience in a very deep, deep way
Mm-hmm.
at a time in life. So we're in our, mid 20s, that were so formative. And so I feel really lucky that I was able to have that in my very first kind of real grown up person job. Um, and like I said, I was there for 12 years. So I got a lot of, and many of us now in our early 50s, we say how much of our needs we got met while at work, because we were at work with our friends, with the people who were in the fight, in the movement right along with us for homeless youth. And working with young people who really, some of them weren't a whole lot younger than were at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
yeah. So I don't feel like I don't feel like that ever happened, as far as not being seen. It was, yeah, nothing like when I was younger and in care, and really
Yeah.
experiencing being other felt like. And so a lot of
Mm-hmm.
college, and then going into the workforce, I was able to be seen. And I think it was by luck, by grit, whatever, however I landed where I landed. And I was able to get that from my place of work in many, many ways. So yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that you had that experience. And you bring up a really important point too, that and I'll speak for myself. I don't want to speak for a whole community, but for me, yeah, work was the constant that I had. And work was something that made me feel good. So, yes, I felt invisible at work for my adoptee identity and foster care identity. But man, was I a good employee? And I was well loved, right, by my
Yeah.
managers and the people around me because I produced a lot. And
Mhm.
my capacity was high at work because I that is somewhere where I felt, to your point, that I could have some kind of impact and worth and value because I didn't get that in the homes that I was in.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of us with lived experience, um, sometimes, right, we form really unhealthy behaviors and habits because of those feelings. And we don't, we continue to neglect ourselves
Right.
while giving at work and to other people.
Mhm.
But I think, yeah, you bring up a really great point. And I guess, like, for those of us watching this replay and listening in, it's something to consider, right? Joining organizations, right, that are doing transformative work with communities on the ground. It
Mhm.
is a great place for you to find some healing, some empowerment, and
Yes.
like community with
Mm.
people that don't share your exact lived experience necessarily, but they share like the experience that you have of being othered and marginalized and
Yeah.
all these things. So
Mhm.
I'm so happy you found that very early on in your career.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. You don't realize how much of a blessing it is until, you reflect back. So if this, yes, as if this can be helpful, that's what I would say to people watching is don't don't feel like you have to wait to arrive at some point in time where someone else says, here you go. Like if you
Yeah.
want to for it, don't let age, don't let family constellation, don't let whatever it is get in the way. Just go for it and do that, whatever that is. So
Yeah. Very wise words. I love that. So looking back, right, to your younger self,
Mhm.
even with the, the positive experiences you had, and I'm sure there were still many challenges along the way. Just being a woman of color
Yes,
and a black woman in Minnesota, let's be real.
yes, yes. Yep, yep,
But
definitely.
yeah, looking back, um, like I guess when you think about the future of work now, especially with this very specific community of foster care alums
Mhm.
and transracial adoptees, right? What are some things that you would like to see our society, our workplaces be able to provide professionals that have our lived identities, especially the young ones coming up?
Mhm. Well, I think one benefit that our younger generation has is that they're much more living their lives out loud in all the ways that there are. And so I I believe that it will be easier for the younger generation because of that. Again, like I said, the fosters that are in our network and how they helped me to identify and give language to things and feelings and that I wish I had back then. And so there's this awareness that and being unapologetic as many of our younger people are. So employers are not going to have any choice but to listen and see and hear um, and allow people to bring their whole selves into the workplace. And my hope is that those identities can include more openly and more freely without stigma that someone is an adoptee, transracial adoptee, foster care alum, and being able to talk about what it's like to be a person of color raised in a white family, like where that's not a stigmatized conversation, and that's actually something that people want to hear about. And the only way for that to ever even come out is if people are able to be all that they are, all of the many identities with all of the different intersections. And our society, I think, is getting a lot better with that. So it's going, just as it's easier for us than the generation before us. I think it's easier for the generation coming behind us in so many ways.
Hmm. And the work that you're doing is like a big part of that.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah.
really critical. It's really, really important.
Yeah.
And curious, anything up and coming with foster advocates that you're excited about, that you'd like to share, that you want us to like follow or support?
Yeah, so we right now we're working on a campaign that's called the Minnesota Promise, and it is listening sessions that we've conducted in person around the state in the different regions of the state. We also are holding some virtual sessions where we are hearing from foster youth that are the younger ones are in care because we're going to be doing a listening session for the 14 up to 18 year olds, but all of the other sessions are 18 plus, and just getting an idea from them, from their voices, what has worked, what isn't working, what do they want to see changed, and gathering all of that information that will come into a comprehensive report in 2020, early 2025. So, but what I'm really happy about is that we said, well, we don't want to just focus on those that are transitioning. So let's say, let's talk with the 14 to 17 year olds and get their idea.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, we need to talk with our Native and Indigenous young people. Not only that, but we also have our 28 and older,
Yeah.
like myself, who also want to have a place to share our experiences. We're much further from our time in care, and yet we have the length of time and the wisdom to have, time that we can reflect back and see how much hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's good perspective as well. So really excited for all that's going to come from all of this data that we're gathering, for pretty monumental report that will come out in 2025.
No,
So
that's very exciting.
yeah. So that's
Huge undertaking.
yes, huge, huge, huge. And so that's one. And then the other is as I mentioned earlier, we've passed 5 bills in 5 years. And this year we decided to take a very intentional step on, let's sit back and let's actually be supporters of other organizations and other efforts that align with foster advocates, but we're not going to lead on anything this year. We're going to really work on developing the leadership skills of our foster network, so of our young people. And we are going to be in the support role of other organizations. And that feels really good to make that decision and say, hey, we want to be partners in the work. And sometimes being the partner is walking alongside other people and other organizations. And so that feels really, really good. So we get a little bit of a breather and get to write lots of letters and send lots of emails and really work on relationship building with legislators as well as our community partners.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love hearing that because, I've spent the last 10 years in the nonprofit sector, and too little of that kind of partnership
Mhm.
occurs. So I really commend you for being like a great leader in this space, playing that role, right? Because so many organizations think that they have to take the spotlight all the time
Exactly.
to matter, to fundraise, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, no, we're stronger together. We're stronger together. And
Yeah.
so I really commend you for leading in that way.
Yeah.
So really
Yeah.
proud to know you. So,
Yeah. Likewise.
so my last question for you, and we'll wrap up, is, when you think about the young people you work with, the young people you will work with,
Mhm.
um, who have this lived experience, and you think about putting on your mentor hat, what is advice you would give to them about navigating their identities as foster alum or transracial adoptees in the workplace?
Yeah, I would say in the workplace, I think spending time with yourself or with those that support you, that love you, whether they are friends or family, have your experience or don't, but just people who you hold close, near, and dear to you, and figure out before you start working what it is that you need, what is unique to you, given this identity that you hold. What is it that you need from an employer? What do you need, and what do you need them to see, to know, to hear, um, for you to then be the best employee that you possibly can be? Because you can't be that if you're hiding a huge part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think framing it in the way of, I really want to show up and be the best employee. And in order for me to be able to do that, here are the different parts of me that I don't want to mute just because I'm at work. And here's what that means. And I think it's really important to just name it and say it and be proud. And, but I think it's important to find out what that is first.
Mm-hmm.
Some self examination.
Yeah, it's very wise. I think that is one of the best pieces of advice I've heard. So
Oh,
thank
oh,
you.
yeah.
These are things that I wish I would have heard when
Mm-hmm.
I was younger, and I think many others who share our lived experience. And you're right. Like, you have to identify for yourself what you need and what you want. And so many of us, myself included, instead, what we did, right, was enter the workplace and said, "What do you want me to be?
Yeah.
I'll do it. I'll be it.
Yep.
I'll overwork and I'll over deliver and do all the
Yes.
things." And
Yes.
then I burn out, and then I leave, and then
Mhm.
I'm upset, and I go through all of these traumas and triggers because I've lost, right, another relationship. I've lost another home. I've, all of these things. And so your advice is very, very wise. I hope that, again, you're sharing that with all of the youth that you're working with. You have such great insight, and it's very clear, like, your heart and passion for this community.
Mhm.
And I can't say enough. I'm really proud to know you. So
Oh,
thanks so much for being here and coming on into this space and being a part of the Inclusion Initiative.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. I was really looking forward to it. Happy to come on anytime that you need. And thank you again. And just really excited to see where this is going to blossom into, even greater than it is. So
Thank you. Thank you. And can people reach out to you and connect to you on fosteradvocates.org? Is that the
yes,
website?
yep, it's fosteradvocates.org. I'm also on LinkedIn. If you want to, I don't know what it is, friend me or connect, or I don't know what the lingo is, but
Connect.
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 Um, and yeah, and visit our website and see what we got going on, and we'll keep the community updated. So
Fantastic. Can't wait for that 2025 report. I'm very
yeah,
excited about that.
it'll be very exciting. So, and we'll be in touch. So you and I, so
Wonderful.
sure.
Thank you, Nikki, so much. I'm
We'll
going to
have,
stop the recording,
okay.
okay?
Yeah.